From the New York City area, welcome to the Badass Counseling Show, where the master badass himself, Sven takes you deep and gives balm for the soul, baby.
Welcome, welcome. It's great to have you here joining us on the Badass Counseling Show. Your favorite podcast, my favorite podcast, wherever you may be tuning in from, whether it is Cologne, Germany, or Canterbury, England, from Canada down to Chattanooga, all points south, especially down in New Zealand and Australia. We love you down there, and our followers over in South Africa as well, and Japan, all around the world. Thank you for tuning into the Badass Counseling Show. I am your host, Sven Erlandson, and I am joined in studio by KC, who is, as per usual, in the booth, and Rob the Rocket, of course, sitting next to me. Rob,
Yo.
Hello.
It is my favorite podcast, too. And as we used to say in the radio business, if you play it long enough and loud enough, you make it a hit.
Wow. And what decade would that have been the mantra in?
Well, in the 60s.
And where did you get your start in radio, Rob? What state or country were you in?
Upstate New York.
Really?
Yep. Albany, Schenectady, Troy.
Wow. And what was the radio station?
Well, it was the college radio station first, and then it was the Big 92, WFLY FM.
Were you an on-air personality, Rob?
Why, yes. And now I am again. So thanks, dude.
And what were you spinning back then? What was your music?
Top 40.
And what was
oldies? Yeah.
So what would have been one or two of the top 40 ones that jump out at you that you would have been spinning back then?
Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey.
Classic.
You know, it was a pick hit. You know, originally the album came in and we picked every other song on there that we thought would be the single. Uh-huh. The only one we didn't pick was Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey.
We're so sorry. So that would have been late 70s, right?
No, early 70s.
Was it?
70,
excuse me.
Yeah.
I meant to say late 60s.
Yeah, that was 70, 71 right in there.
I remember growing up singing that song. We're so sorry, Uncle Albert. Classic. Well, enough radio shenanigans. Roberto, tell us about Erica, please.
All right. Erica wrote in and said, is it depression, my ADHD, or both? I'm struggling to behave like a responsible, blasted adult. I need to clear out my father's house, sell as much of the contents as I can, buy my own home, and yet I haven't done a damn thing. I'm stuck in a loop of apathy, and I can't seem to crawl out of it.
Erica, thanks for coming on the show.
You're welcome.
Great. Good to have you here. Let's get to work. I need to clear out my father's house, sell as much of the contents as I can, buy my own home, and yet I haven't done a damn thing. Why do you need to do all of these things?
My father is now in a nursing facility in a town not too far from where I'm at right now. I'm, for the time being, living in his home. He also has ADHD. When he was diagnosed, that's when I kind of started putting some pieces together. And my mother died in 2014. So after she died, he kind of spiraled down and let the house go. There are a lot of things in this house that need to be fixed, too many things. And there's a lot of stuff. My parents were collectors, so to speak.
And so you have to get rid of all this stuff. Is there a time frame that you're sort of stuck on? I mean, you could let it sit indefinitely if you needed to.
If I had to, I suppose I could let it sit indefinitely, but that would mean, because Dad never paid the house off, so he still owes on it.
I see. So you're having to make those payments, or that's coming out of some sort of...
Yeah, money is still automatic withdrawal coming out of his bank account.
Gotcha. So that you didn't get saddled with his bills or anything like that?
Some of them, mainly because I don't want to be a total freeloader.
Oh,
so
okay.
I'm trying to make sure I pay at least some of his bills.
Fair enough. And what's the reason that you've chosen to live in his former home?
I actually moved in with my dad here in the house back in 2019 when the man I was involved with and I broke up. And the rent on the townhome I was living in had gone up, and I couldn't really afford it anymore. Dad needed help.
So it was a win for everybody,
Well, yeah.
at least financially to some degree. What do you think the reason is that you can't seem to sort of get any of the work done, or, you're stuck in a loop? Just off the top of your head, what might the reason be?
I look around at all of it and I start to feel overwhelmed. And instead of being an adult and dealing with it, I just stick my head in the sand and do anything else except doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Well, and that's, on one hand, it's totally understandable because it sounds like it's a big job. And just out of curiosity, and being overwhelmed by that, by a task like that, is actually an adult response too. You say, well, I'm not just being an adult, putting yourself down, rather than recognizing that, in fact, being overwhelmed by such a daunting task is, in fact, overwhelming. It's a very natural response. When my parents passed away, each of them within the course of just a year and a half of each other, they were in their 90s, and they had already scaled down from a 4-bedroom, large suburban house down to a 1-bedroom apartment that they had been living in for, let's just say, 10 years. When they died, all they had was the stuff in the 1-bedroom apartment and a storage unit. And it took 3 of my siblings to go through all that stuff, and they're still going through it. I just got a box literally a few weeks ago of my dad's old theological books, because I was a pastor too. And so it's still happening. So the idea of doing it as you're by yourself, it's overwhelming. It just is. You're not less of an adult because, you're overwhelmed and you just don't want to fucking do it. And it's just like, oh my God, that doesn't make you less of an adult. Okay, just for the record. So and you're there's sort of shaming yourself in there. I'm struggling to behave like a responsible, blasted adult, and all I'm just trying to say is it's okay, Erica. It's a big job. It's a big job. Again, I have 3 siblings working on ours, so kind of a big job. Apart from the actual physical work, what's the most overwhelming part?
I'm not even sure where to begin with that. It's a large 3-bedroom home, and I call it junk. I'm sure if my dad was here and if my mother was alive, they'd be offended by that. A lot of big furniture. The bedroom has, in fact, I'm in the master bedroom right now, and I'm sitting on the large queen size storage bed that they had.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of junk. There's just a lot of stuff. But what I'm wondering is there another aspect to this task? And maybe there isn't. Maybe there's not. Is there another aspect to this task besides the actual physical aspect of going through it all, which is mentally taxing, no doubt about it? Is there an emotional task to this in terms of, is there stuff there, and maybe there's not, but is there stuff there that all this stuff is going to conjure up feelings? Is there any of that element to it as well?
I would say so. Part of it is anger.
What are you most angry about, Erica?
They kept accumulating stuff, things that they didn't even need. And maybe it's a generational thing. My parents were from the silent generation, born in 1938, 1939, respectively.
And you're angry that they kept accumulating this stuff because the burden now falls on you to unburden all this crap? Is that the anger?
I think so. Well, no, not even I think so. Yes.
And so it's all on your shoulders, that their lifetime of accumulated shit is now on your shoulders. And just out of curiosity, in that regard, maybe it was equal, but who are you more mad at for that, mom or dad?
I'm going to have to say dad, but I think my anger at my dad has different layers to it. It's not just about the fact that after my mom died, he didn't make a move to do anything, and yes, I know he was grieving and he'd probably sunk down into a deep depression. So I have to acknowledge that, but he would pretty much spend all of his free time watching TV, and that was it. Stopped going to church, and they were faithful churchgoers. Pretty much stopped doing a lot of things.
Are you most mad at him for checking out of life, or are you most mad at him for not doing the work to unburden all this crap?
I think him not doing anything about all this junk was part of checking out of life.
And so the bigger thing then was the checking out of life. For you, you're mad at him for checking out of life, not necessarily the junk per se, but the checking out. And what is the biggest part about him checking out of life that angers you the most?
God. No, I've got to acknowledge this. I've got to be honest with myself about this.
It's not the junk, is it?
It felt selfish. Like he wasn't thinking of anybody but his damn self.
And what are you referring to when it felt selfish? He checks out, it felt selfish. What was the price to you? Is it that now you're stuck with all his junk? Or was it that you lost him in your relationship with him, or what?
My relationship with him has been strained and rather ambivalent most of my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll be the first one to say that that's that's tied in to all of this.
Mm-hmm. And so if it's been strained and ambivalent, what has been the most thing missing that in retrospect maybe you wish had been there between the two of you? What was the biggest thing missing between this woman and her father, over your life?
That it felt like he never really accepted me the way I am. I had an older sister. She died in 2002 of metastatic breast cancer. That on top of my mother dying, I think did just shut him down. God, I hope I can make this short. I don't want to go off on tangents here, but we were 8.5 years apart. And she was very smart, very talented. She sang, she sewed.
Golden child?
Yeah.
And as a result, you were what?
I was just kind of there. That's what it felt like, that I was just there.
And what were you most wanting, particularly from Dad, as long as we're talking about Dad?
Honestly, from both of my parents, it would have been nice to know that our family life revolved around both my sister and myself equally, instead of it feeling like it revolved around her needs and wants and Dad's needs and wants.
And so your entire life, you've been to some degree at the bottom of the pecking order, it sounds like, in terms of importance in particular. And your mom dies, your sister dies, in whatever order. And then it's the two of you. And well, sure, it's understandable that he would have grief, and certainly understandable you would have grief, of course, both of you. But here's the grand opportunity for Dad to reach out to his family, his remaining family, you, and the two of you to begin to build something, and he instead checks out. Further confirming, and this may sting a little bit, but further confirming the message you've gotten the whole time, and that is, you're not worth it. You're not important.
Well, and it feels like I'm only important because of what I can do for
function.
him.
Absolutely. Your function. Absolutely. Absolutely. Which in a way hurts even more. I have to believe it hurts even more because you don't want me for who I am. You just want me to do for you, to do shit for you. How is that fair? How is that love? It's like, you son of a bitch. You son of a bitch. You're just confirming what I'm nothing. Go ahead.
I remember one time I got into a fight with him. He and I have gotten into fights since I was 10.
And what's at the root of the fight since you were 10? What has been at the root of the fights for you? What really is, apart from the surface issue you're fighting over, what really is it that's going on below the surface?
I was not turning out the way he wanted me to turn out. I was supposed to be, like I said, he was born in 1938.
Mm-hmm.
And women were supposed to be a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
I was born in 1970, so you're of the same generation I am.
Mm-hmm.
And Dad was into science fiction. He was a science fiction nerd before there were science fiction nerds.
Mm-hmm.
And he took the family to go see Star Wars when I was 7.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, I was exposed to this female character in this science fiction canon for lack of a better word, who was strong, who talked back, who questioned authority. This was one of my influences right there. He finally admitted to me a few months back before he moved into the home, I got to be honest, you were a brat when you were a kid.
You were the problem. It wasn't him. You were the problem. And you said a minute ago, I was not turning out the way he wanted me to. What in just one or two words, or one sentence, what fundamentally was he wanting you to be?
The obedient, quiet, ladylike, ultra feminine young lady, that stereotype that he had grown up with, that women were supposed to be.
Yeah.
What he felt my sister was growing up to be. And I wasn't that.
And no, you weren't that. And what does it feel like to grow up? Give me a feeling word. What does it feel like to grow up during those years and into your teens and 20s and 30s? What does it feel like to grow up knowing you are a grand fucking disappointment to the most powerful man in your life? Set the question aside. What are you feeling right now?
Anger.
About what? In one sentence or less, what are you most angry about? Did I ask that question? What are you most angry about right now?
That who I am, whatever that isn't good enough. Isn't worth loving. This was always very telling to me. Instead of saying, come here, I want to give you a hug. Dad would always say, come here and give your old man a hug.
And the underlying message to you in all of that is?
You have to give me something.
Yeah, you exist to serve him.
I don't want you to think that
What don't you want me to think?
My parents weren't horrible, awful people.
I believe you. And isn't it interesting that in expressing your anger, this is really interesting, that in expressing your anger, you now need to make the quick shift. You need to put in a caveat. But Sven, they weren't bad people. You need to protect them. You feel the need to protect them. And I get it. I'm not dogging you. But isn't it interesting that you can't have your feelings and just let them be without throwing in a protection order for them? Sven, don't start thinking they're bad people. And I believe you. And this is the point, isn't it? That even good people can really, really, really do some damage, hurt a child. That's how sensitive and temperamental and volatile that little being is. But isn't it fascinating? You felt the need to protect mom and dad. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
That it's not okay for you to just have your feelings without saying, hey, but don't be too hard on my mom and dad. Go easy on them, please, Sven. I don't want you to think. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
That even in your own telling of the story, your feelings aren't important enough to stand on their own and let the judgments be what the judgments will be. I don't want you to dislike them. You know what? I want to stay on this exact point, but we're going to take a quick break. We'll come right back to it.
I had a really good start in my life, and I've been successful in my career, but I have to say I've learned so much and improved my outlook on life since I met Sven and picked up a copy of Badass Wisdom. With the daily meditations as journaling prompts, I've uncovered a lot of memories that weren't totally pleasant. With Sven's guidance, I've achieved some new understanding, and honestly, I feel lighter. Badass Wisdom is a great read, in nice small bites, and I think anyone can benefit from it. So go to badasscounseling.com and get the book or the audiobook. It could change your life.
This show provides soul counseling intended to entertain and inform and is not medical advice. Now, back to the badass.
All right, Erica, right back where we were. I want to just rewind the tape just a hair. I had asked you the question, you were feeling angry that who I am, and towards Dad, that who I am isn't good enough. And that's the message that's been at the root of so many of your fights, and that you were disappointed. He was disappointed you weren't turning out the way he wanted you to. And the question I had asked you is, what does it feel like? What did it feel like in your teens, 20s, 30s What did it feel like to know that you were a goddamn disappointment to your own father? What did it feel like to know that he looked down on you, that he didn't like who you are? What did that feel like?
This is going to might sound a little odd to use this word, but it felt withering.
That's the perfect word. That makes total sense. And when you use the word withering, we think of the phrase withering criticism. The criticism's so extraordinary that the other person just, like a plant, just withers, just drops, just all the air is sucked out of their lungs. All of the life force is just immediately drained from them. Accurate or inaccurate?
No, that's accurate. And then you put on top of it that my sister used to say things to me like, oh, well, that's attractive, or you're too sensitive.
Oh,
you're just too sensitive.
So she jumped on the bandwagon, and she was allowed, because she was the golden child, the favored status, she used that opportunity to grind her heel into your throat, sort of. Wow. We're just out of curiosity, were mom and or dad aware that this is how she treated you at times?
Mom was. I can remember one particular incident. We were the three of us, Mom, and I'm just going to call my sister V. I'm not going to use her real name.
Let's call her Vicky.
Mom,
let's just randomly call her.
Okay, there we go.
All right.
Mom, Vicky, and I were in the car. I was just a teenager at the time, and Vicky was in college studying music performance. And I don't even remember what song came on. It was the flippin' 1980s. So of course it had that electric drum beat behind it.
Yep.
I'm in the backseat, being my teenage self, bopping along.
Yeah.
And Vicky looks at Mom and goes, yeah, she only seems to like music that just basically implying that I only liked shallow pop music. And Mom said nothing.
She didn't defend you.
No, Mom was not Mom didn't like conflict. Mom would avoid conflict as much as possible. And Mom herself was an oldest child.
If Mom's avoiding conflict by the time you're a teenager, it's reasonable to assume Mom always avoided conflict. That was sort of her MO. And Dad obviously disapproves of you, that you're not, girly enough and so forth, and, be a good girl, all that crap. And so by Mom avoiding conflict, a vacuum is created. A power vacuum is sort of created. She's not stepping in and providing equal protection before the law, sort of thing. And Dad disapproved, and Dad and your sister was the golden child because she was being what Dad wanted to be. So therefore, she has the power. She has Dad's backing, and there's no sheriff in town. There's no mom providing that equal protection. So there's a vacuum that your sister steps into, and she can exercise all the power she wants. She can, grind you down all she wants, it sounds like, because no one's going to stop her, and Dad supports her. Dad thought it himself.
There was one time, and it wasn't until I was an adult, where one of my parents actually stepped in.
Which parent?
Funny enough, it was Dad.
And Dad stepped in and said what?
It was a holiday dinner here at the house, and I don't even remember what the conversation was specifically, but my sister started in on the whole, well, you're too sensitive. And I said, well, if I wasn't sensitive, I wouldn't be able to write poetry. And she goes, well, there's sensitive, and then there's too sensitive. And I could even remember, I just kind of physically bowed forward like,
Withering.
A withering, wilting plant.
Yep.
And my dad looks at her and says, quit needling your sister.
What did that feel like?
At first, I was shocked because I'd never heard either one of my parents ever yell at my sister.
At first, I was shocked. And then later, what?
I remember thinking, well, it's about fucking time.
Right. Which is an angry response. Isn't it interesting? He steps in, and in the end, it actually makes you angry. It's like, and what's fascinating about that, quit needling your sister, implies that he's seen it before. If it were a one-off, it would be like, whatever. It happened once. It implies he had seen it before, which in a way makes it worse. It's like, as you said, where the fuck were you before? So you've been allowing this behavior the whole time? You son of a bitch. You've been allowing this. Quit needling as if it's happened before. You've seen it before and you didn't do anything. Why now? Why is this so bad? Why today? It's like, what about all the other years of my having to go through this stuff? You fucking knew, Dad. You fucking knew. Which implies that he saw that there was a problem and he didn't care enough to do something about it. Which is a different story from he didn't know. He did know. Mm-hmm. I have a question for you, sort of as an aside. There might be an easy answer to this question, but I want you to just dwell on it for a second and find if there's maybe a deeper answer than the surface answer. I want to ask you a question about power. And there are different types of power. There's financial power, there's brute force power, there's the power to walk away from someone, there's the power to needle someone, and just sort of the withering power of that. There are all sorts of different types of power in any sort of relationship, and all of those are playing in at every moment of every day. Okay? And so let me ask you this. In your parents' relationship, just in their relationship with each other, what was the power distribution in terms of percentages? Who had what percent of the power? Now, with the silent generation or my parents' World War II generation, the quick answer would be, well, it was the man. The man had all the power. And maybe your dad did. But there are other powers at play here. There's the power of the private parts. For a lot of guys, you think they have the power, but they just really want, they really want the affection. They really want the sex. And so even though on the surface they're putting up this, she really has the power because she has the private parts, okay? And there's the power of the money, and there's the power of this, power of the parents, the in-laws, or whatever. So all of those factors taken into account to the degree that although you know them as well as anyone, what was the power distribution in mom and dad's relationship with each other? Who had what percent?
I would say that dad definitely had 75% of it.
Okay. And what was mom's power? Where did she get power in that 25%? What did she have power over him with regard to?
She did handle the finances, which was unusual for people of their generation. But as far as what got spent on what, or how much got spent on what, or if something got spent on something, dad had the final say.
What did dad fear most in mom or from mom or about mom?
Oh.
Knowing what you know of their personalities, what could she have done or stopped doing or employed? What could she have done that he would be most afraid of her doing?
Becoming much more independent, I think.
The reason he might fear her becoming much more independent is what? Why would he fear that? What happens if she becomes independent? And that dovetails, by the way, with what you were saying about why your sister was the golden child and why he didn't like you, is because you were independent. What did he fear happening if she becomes more independent?
Probably that she would see that she didn't really need him.
And do what?
And leave.
There you go. She had the power to leave. I mean, she didn't, but he feared her leaving. Whether or not she ever would, and, that generation, whatever, but he feared that. And as a result, if mom knew that, or any power that your mom had, which you're acknowledging she had, let's say 25%, how would your mom most use the power that she had in those times where she would exercise her power or stand up for something or shut something down or try to get something? What would your mom most often use her power for?
Here's the bizarre part. Just as an example, when he and I would get into yelling matches, she wouldn't get involved during the fight, but later when he would, of course, vent to her about it, she would start saying, she's got to become her own person. She's got to. That was the weird part. Mom, she wouldn't admonish my sister when my sister would dig at me, but at the same time, mom accepted me just the way I was, just the way I am. It was like I just got these mixed messages in the house.
You definitely did. Well, and you actually got mixed messages from mom herself. You got the message of, I support you, I accept you. And be you. You got to be you, I mean, there was clearly a power struggle between mom and dad regarding that specific message, but it wasn't like she stood up and shut down the forces that were trying to keep you from being you. So it seems to me the feeling, and you pick a different one if you want. It's as an outsider, it seems to me the strongest feeling that you would have regarding your mother is disappointment. It's like, you saw me, Mom. I mean, yeah, you did the things after the fact, but fucking hell, I had to eat bullets every day, from mom, from dad and sister. Disappointment or something. What is it for you?
Disappointment. I mean, I'm glad that she would talk to dad and try to get him to see.
Sure. Well, it clearly didn't work, right? But anyway, go ahead.
Obviously, she never did that with my sister.
Right. And why do you think that is? It almost seems to imply your mom feared your sister more than she feared your dad.
No, she didn't fear my sister. My dad was in the Air Force when my sister was a child.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, he was stationed in Alaska, and my mother and my sister were living in Washington State.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of feel as if my mother and my sister had this, or that my mother might have felt this bond with my sister because of the two of them spending so much time together.
Mm-hmm.
And then dad and my sister being apart, I feel like dad and my sister put each other on these pedestals.
Why would your mom be afraid to have the conversation with your sister, to back the fuck off of your sister, to say that to your sister, to Vicky, about you? Why would she be afraid of that? Is it because she fears losing that bond with your sister?
I don't know that mom was necessarily afraid of my sister. I think
then
like
why,
my dad.
Okay, but you were the one that brought up they had this relationship. When I asked you the question, or we were talking about but my mom never had the conversation with Vicky, standing up for me and say, hey, we need to accept your sister, your kid's sister. She never had that. And then you brought up because they had a relationship. And I'm just wondering, what does that have to do with anything? If they had the relationship, that would imply she could speak candidly with her and say, hey, come on now, be good to your little sister. She could have spoken candidly, and I'm wondering why she didn't.
Because I think, like my dad, she had my sister on a pedestal. Vicky could do no wrong.
Right.
She couldn't do anything wrong.
Right.
Whereas I was constantly forgetting things. So
everybody was worshiping at the pedestal of Vicky. And
yeah.
And so you just weren't important enough. I mean, come on, let's just be really honest. Yeah, I mean, it was nice that your mom said that shit on the side, but in the end, it didn't matter. In the end, your sister was queen, and you just, you were sort of the, Cinderella. You were the kid back in the...
I was the court jester.
Wow. And so fundamentally then, put it in one sentence then, what was your image of yourself? What did the child translate all those messages into? What was your words to describe yourself? Who were you in your own eyes at 10, at 15, at 20, and 25? Who were you, basically? What was your sentence to describe yourself? What was your identity?
I was the fuck up who made bad choices and lost her temper and cussed too much and wasn't providing anything to brag about.
And how has that message, being your core message, your interpretation of how you were raised and based on their actions, that's totally understandable. A kid would develop that then as their sort of life identity. I'm the fuck up who makes bad choices, who cussed too much and wasn't providing anything, didn't bring anything to the table. How did that then affect your life choices as you moved into adulthood?
Oh, let's see. I've gone through a carousel of relationships.
Gotcha. And what fundamentally has that, have you become in your relationships as a result, and in your career as a result of that core belief system? I'm a fuck up who makes bad choices, etc. How does it cause you to walk in the world and act in relationships and in life?
I'm afraid to take risks for fear of failure.
Afraid of risk. And the reason you're afraid of failure and risk is because what? If you fail, then what?
Then I just end up proving once again how much
That's it.
of a loser I am.
That's it. It's confirmation that I'm a loser. There we go. That's right.
I didn't go for my master's degree.
Mm-hmm.
I have a bachelor's. It took me forever to get my bachelor's,
Mm-hmm.
but I have never tried to go for my master's degree.
Right.
In part because of finances, but a huge part is because I thought I'll never get in, or I'll get in and once again I will fail.
That's right. And isn't it reasonable to assume that a child who is taught all of these things about their lack of worth is going to believe that, is going to assume the worst in advance, is going to assume, isn't it reasonable that if you strap a 500-pound bag of rocks to anyone that they're going to get tired?
Yeah.
And so then let me ask you this. Let's take this whole body of information and experience that we've been discussing and put it onto where you are right now in this house of all this more fucking responsibility. You've been carrying these fuckers your whole fucking life and all their responsibilities, and now all their responsibilities get dropped on your doorstep. And forgive me for asking the obvious question, but where the fuck is your sister? Why doesn't she clean out the goddamn house? That's right.
She passed away.
That's right. That's right. That's right. I had forgotten that, and I apologize for forgetting that.
Interesting for you to note or to admit, I haven't been to my mom or my sister's graves since their funerals.
What does it boil down to? In one sentence or less, what's the reason you haven't been to their graves? Because
they're not there anymore. Who the hell am I going to yell at?
Okay, on one hand, and let's stick with that idea of yelling at. That implies you want to yell at them.
That's a yes.
Okay. And I want to yell at them, which means you're angry at them, which would explain why you're not going to their fucking grave. Fuck them. And so let me ask you this. In one sentence or less, what do you most want to scream to your sister's face or her dead grave? What do you, in one sentence, your sister, what's the one sentence you most want to scream at her?
Why?
Okay.
Why?
And then if I were to give you a second sentence that wasn't a question, but is actually a statement, what would you most want to scream at your sister? What do you most feel? What do you most want to say to her?
You arrogant bitch.
Come on. Good start. You arrogant bitch. Now, how does the sentence go? You didn't say, dear Vicky. You said, arrogant bitch. Now finish the sentence. You arrogant bitch, what?
You arrogant bitch. You were supposed to be my sister. You were supposed to be my goddamn sister.
That's it. That's it.
And the thing that I can remember, after my sister moved out, my parents started, like, suddenly I existed. My sister was moved out and I started existing. All the attention that I'd wanted from my mom when I was just a child, I was now getting. And don't get me wrong, I guess my mom confessed this one to me. She said that after Vicky had moved out and that mom and dad were doing all these things for me, Vicky complained and said, you're spoiling Erica. You know that. You're spoiling her. And mom said, before Erica was born, you got spoiled. Now it's Erica's turn.
And that most makes you feel what? Or on what did it make you feel? Yeah, on one hand felt nice, but what?
But it was like I wanted to say, Mom, it was too little too late by that point.
Anger. And so now answer the second question. What do you most want to scream in your mother's face or at her dead fucking gravesite? Because it's not just you're not visiting your sisters, you're not visiting moms either. What do you most want to scream at your mother? Be honest, dig deep.
I love you and I know you loved me, but God damn it, you didn't show it very much when I was little because you were spending so much damn time with her.
That's it. You didn't show it.
Every time my sister came into the room, I stopped existing. Is what it felt like.
Wow. Every time my sister came into the room, It's like I stopped existing. Wow. Wow. That sends the message right there. That you want to know how messages, folks, get pressed into the cement of a child's soul? That's it right there. No word had to be spoken towards Erica. They didn't have to say, oh, you're a worthless little shit who's unimportant and I really don't care about you, because their message was screamed through their actions. Am I correct?
Yeah. And I can remember trying to explain this to my mom in a therapy session years and years and years ago.
And her response was?
She just sat there and looked at me. She had this helpless look on her face, like she didn't know what to say. Or
isn't it fascinating? She didn't even try to deny it, which implies you're right and I knew it. Doesn't necessarily confirm that, but it sure implies like you're right. You're right. Which almost makes it worse. It's like, you motherfucker, you fucking knew. You fucking knew.
She knew and she just didn't want to admit it.
She knew and she didn't want to do anything about it. And she didn't want to admit it in the counseling session, but then at the time, she didn't want to do anything about it. If she's giving that side message to your dad, the counter message to your dad on the side, but she wasn't doing anything about it. So in a way, she saw the problem, that you needed to be affirmed and accepted for who you were. And she was doing that on the side with your dad after the arguments, whatever. But she wasn't doing it and standing up and not backing down. In other words, she didn't defend you. She didn't get you out of there. She didn't, whatever. You weren't important enough. She was presumably, if dad had all the power, she was maybe of that generation, afraid of being on her own, afraid of having to live, afraid of having to do it. But she saw how you were being treated wasn't right, but she didn't get you out of there and she didn't protect you, presumably maybe because she couldn't go live on her own, or she feared, your dad getting mad at her or whatever. So in a way, potentially she was protecting herself at the expense of you. And so then the one thing, final question, what is the one sentence you most want to scream at your dad? All things considered, not just the house, but a lifetime of being the grand fucking disappointment. What is the one sentence you most want to scream at him?
It was always about you, wasn't it? It was always about what you fucking wanted. It was always about how you were perceived by other people. It was always about you getting your way.
And then what do you want to say on top of that to him?
It was always about how your children reflected on you.
And so as a result, you want to say what to him? How do you feel? What do you want to say to him? Yes, it was always about him. His answer is yes, it is. And then what do you want to say? Or he says nothing. What do you most want to fucking say to him?
I am tired.
There it is.
I am fucking tired of feeling like I've had to hold up your damn ego.
There it is. So as a result, that's exactly it. And you now have your 3 primary jumping off points for your own journaling right here. You've got your rage at your mom, you've got your rage at your sister, and you've got your rage at your dad. And this is your self-work right here. There's so much in there right now. There's so much in you that still needs to come out. That's what's burdening you from the inside, let alone the burden that you're living in and the house and all that. This is this is the real burden. And this is the shit that has to come out. I tell you what, Erica, you've been a great guest. This has been a fascinating story, really a fascinating story. And I'm grateful for you for opening up and digging deep. You really dug deep on some of this stuff. And you found some, maybe some lost memories, but definitely some like, holy shit, these feelings. It's more than just why to my sister. It's you fucking arrogant bitch. And you dug deep. This is awesome. Would you be willing to stick around for just a few minutes afterwards?
Yeah.
All right. And Rob, any final thoughts?
Well, she was inspired by Princess Leia. Maybe that's a jumping off point. And as Yoda might say, begun. The closet cleaning has.
Begun what?
The closet cleaning has.
The closet cleaning has. Is that actually a line?
Well, it is now.
It is now. I like it. I would have thought it was a line based on that perfect interpretation. Anywho, thank you to everyone for tuning into the show and us learning from Erica's story and being challenged. And it'll be fascinating for you in your own journaling and your own self-work to see how this story inspires you or pushes you or challenges you to go deeper and see new insights regarding your own family and your own healing. to all of our friends from Belgium to Belgrade to all points, east, west, north, south. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Badass Counseling Show. On behalf of Rob and KC, have a kick-ass day.
The Badass Counseling Show is strictly copyrighted. No copies may be made without the express written consent of the Badass Counseling Show, LLC. The Badass Counseling Show is produced by Karen Camparelli and Robert H. Friedman. Executive producer Sven Erlandson. Original music by two-time Emmy Award-winning composer Trevor Morris. Have a kick-ass day.